A lot better than this.
Is it still warm?
Yeah, luckily. North Carolina isn't.
No, not really.
Congrats on college, by the way. I remember one of you got in for college.
Yeah, that's just out.
Congrats, Alex.
Thank you.
Y'all are good, right?
Yeah.
Ellie, are you good?
She like just got out of she's she said give her a few minutes.
Oh, that's not. Don't pep our case, please.
I'm not gonna. Don't worry.
What do you know? Oh. Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
At least when already.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
We're ready to start.
Ellie, did you get the email chain? Yeah, so I just woke up.
I'm good. You want to negate the resolution. Contention what is data off-lease. Small businesses are booming. Austin 23 finds that the country's business startup rate ticked up to 8.9%, the highest since the Great Recession. Uniquely, CIA 1212 finds that cybersecurity experienced substantial risk shifts and focus. The White House unveiled a comprehensive plan that over 65 initiatives aimed at mitigating cyber risk, emphasizing public-private sector collaboration that protects by from 40 to 45%, necessitating reliance on the emerging tech. Affirming diverse attention. Grants 21 finds that Section 230 companies would be legally responsible if the data across their networks resources would be diverted from cybersecurity to content modifications. Companies would cease to exist, even if some survive. Coup 23 finds that liability for concerns hits small businesses heavily because they do not have the financial resources. Many cybersecurity vendors and small businesses rely on all, but we might not have cybersecurity if 230 protections are lost. Independently, Duffield 21 finds that Section 230 smaller firms would look to be acquired. The easiest way of doing that liability is acquisition. The repealing would suppress competition of long-reading activity onto larger platforms. Dataopoly are widely vulnerable. Stuck 18 finds that in a monopolized market, but with more data concentrated in fewer companies, hackers have a greater incentive for breach and the harm done greater with a normal company. Data becomes accessible. Stuck 18 finds that without competition, dataopolies suppress their privacy protection between the competitive levels of a fault to disclose what they have collected and attack those nuclear. Chin 22 finds that a large vendor might store significant amounts of sensitive data, including access credentials. The hackers deeply impact national security, deploy digital supply chain attack, and the efforts affecting the government network and homeland security. It's perceptual. Petrovic 21 finds that even anticipation could produce a strategic consequence. The nuclear conflict, if a target seek observe the operation against an NC3 concluded that they must unleash their nuclear weapons, and tensions can become misperceived, producing the perception that there could be an attack. Overall, Star 15 finds that a war with a nuclear weapon would create an environment too full to grow food and only humans would vanish forever. And contention 2 is FTC. FTC's increased enforcement and privacy now. It's focused on algorithmic bias. Fazio 21 finds that the new FTC chair signaled that the FTC might increase enforcement in the privacy and data security realm. Slaughter pointed out that the area of FTC, the AI biometrics, and the FTC focus on the algorithmic discrimination. The companies to keep in mind their focus on the FTC have indicated that it needs to beef up privacy law penalties. The repeal estimates AI innovation results in overregulation. Tier and Weisman 23 finds that a member of Congress is advancing radical ideas for regulating AI. The most dangerous involves the repeal of Section 230. This could stop the next digital revolution. It would take the U.S. back for 30 years by undermining the legal linchpin beyond which the greatest outpouring of the history. The Section 230 immunized the online interdisciplinary liability. Regulatory burdens will proliferate and AI will wither. The heavy-handed approach to AI will decimate the algorithm innovation, and the American shooting itself in the foot as a global race for AI supremacy heats up. Litigation against AI misinformation falls upon the FTC. That's key research because vague laws and non-compliance. Swarovski finds that image, video, or text is created by artificial intelligence. Enforcement would fall to the FTC as the federal government's top tech industry watchdog. Breaking from can be considered disruptive practice, which would run a full law. The pledge does not include the specific requirements, which could complicate regulatory effects. The tech companies do not walk the walk to support regulation. Policymakers are touted as a way to address the misinformation. FTC enforcement is the primary bulwark against algorithmic discrimination. Home 21 finds that FTC will take enforcement action against companies that sell or use algorithms, AI tech that results in discrimination. The agency uses companies developing using AI to ensure that their AI tools or applications do not result in biased outcome because a failure to do so results in the FTC enforcement. FTC activity renewed for bias. The FTC has been policing against AI and big data and intends to going forward. The reinforces acting chair Slaughter's speech on algorithmic discrimination. FTC enforcement reflects the increased scrutiny. The algorithmic bias risk extinction through drone surveillance and inequality. Thomas 20 finds that Flavian conservative machines are being fault-fed incentives to humans. As MIT professor and leading AI research puts in, the real threat from AI is confidence. The emphasized importance of preparation means nothing to eliminate the data bias, which is a corrupting effect on the algorithm and flat-firing the AI appointment. The unpreparedness will be the biggest mistake in human history, enable brutal dictatorships without unprecedented inequality suffering from extinction if we steer careful and end up in a fantastic world. Thus, Elon and I probably gave.
Let me know when you
Sounds good. Got it. Cool.
Reaffirming contention, what is genocide? Social media has fundamentally changed the nature of genocide. MRG 19 writes that as the reach of social media grows, so does its impact in genocide. Social media platforms now occupy a central role in stigmatizing target groups, legitimizing violence, and recruiting the killers. In the social media age, the process is accelerated to an unprecedented degree. Conflict narratives, conspiracy theories, and extremist views quickly find a home on platforms where every voice competes for attention. Empirically, HRM17 writes that Sri Lanka, Burma, India, and Ethiopia raised alarms surrounding social media's influence on violence, disinformation, and hate speech target people, enable coordination of attacks, and fuel exasperate atrocities. AI23 writes that meta substantially contributed to the cleansing displacement over 700,000 Rohingya in 2017. Section 230 was the problem. Sloss 20 writes that beyond Myanmar's military used Facebook as a tool for cleansing. Facebook was negligent. Repeal is necessary. Sloss 20 writes that Congress should create an exception to Section 230 to permit civil suits against genocide. Withdrawal of immunity for content that contributes to mass atrocity crimes would be a helpful step for the U.S. to prevent genocide. Otherwise, AI23 writes that in the absence of regulation, history will repeat itself over and over again. That's devastating. Brandis 18 writes that between 1956 and 2016, there have been 43 genocides resulting in the death of 50 million people independently. Genocide comes first. Gallagher 13 writes that policymakers do not think of genocide poses a threat the same way proliferation, piracy, and trafficking do. Genocide erodes the authority of the UN and UNSC, which acts as a stabilizing function in IR authority, may become eroded to the point that instability arises. Contention 2 is the death of activism. Section 230 is enable the consolidation of the internet by rendering moderation unimportant. Waldman 21 writes that what distinguishes the US is gigantic ad-driven sites. Section 230 is not enabled free expression but allowed websites to operate on a massive scale. Moderation becomes harder as the scope of community grows. 230 immunizes providers from legal liability. It turns providers into agents of concentrated influence. Two reasons why consolidating media harms activism. First is censoring movements. Social media consolidation has excessive control over speech and ideology in the US. They even lobby for 230. Johnson 21 finds that the rise of the internet led to the tech giants accumulating an obscene amount of power and control of what we view. Media giants benefited immensely from the Telecommunications Act and lobbied extensively for its passage. Media giants have physical and financial ties to the corporate state, defended arms manufacturers, and the oil industry. With this power, social media corporations will only ever allow for activism which doesn't deeply challenge the status quo. Brody 20 writes that social media may seem like a level playing field. Governments, corporations, and other entities have the resources to dominate. They can use social media to far greater effect than activists. Second is performativity. The ease of social media, mass media organized and sacrificed the foundational elements of activism, which made it historically successful. Mulching 19 reports that before the internet, movements were slower growing. A year of organizing led to the Montgomery bus boycott. A decade to get to the March on Washington spent forming and deepening social connections, strengthening and testing the fiber of movements. Map process such as Occupy Wall Street form rapidly, but lacking underlying resilience, lose focus and potential to affect change. Indeed, Who 20 writes that speed is as much as parallel as promise. Spontaneous movements, often leaderless, lack the infrastructure for making collective decisions. They are left with little room to negotiate demands. Luckily, repealing would reverse consolidation. Without diverse small media would become the dominant form of activism. Waldman 21 writes that without 230, legal jeopardy would grow with size. Smaller forums, it's easy for moderators. Large forums would have to err on the side of caution. Revising 230 would be a blow to platforms that would force them to into the niche television once occupied. Ubiquitous bland. New providers would be courageous, not take down material to which some party objects even under threat of lawsuit. Courage requires human judgment. The result would be less consolidated. Overall, Mice 03 writes that oppression in established power structures can be reformed through nonviolent protest and peaceful political mobilization. Social movements radically change existing balance of power to lead and lead to the increased political participation and corrected systemic forms of injustice. Contention 3 is AI. Generative AI does not create new information, but repeats information it's been fed. Brandon 23 writes that when generative AI creates new content, it draws from existing information entirely driven by third-party outputs. Science, invent, create, or develop outputs absent any prompting for information content provider, meaning that the alleged harmful content was created by another party. Thus, it's 230 protected. Brandon continues, it's analogous to search engines that use algorithms, which courts have held as shielded from liability under Section 230. If 230 repeal thus halts innovation, Weissman 23 finds the repeal of Section 230 could stop the next digital revolution. Indeed, Leonard 23 writes that users could trick chatbots into producing defamatory speech. Thus, Weissman concludes that AI companies cannot operate at all. People will always be trying to use any tool available for nefarious purposes. This would introduce liability to OpenAI for content the user forced it to assemble. Stopping AI is critical. Barton 23 finds that superintelligent AI can execute any goal given. If the resulting goal conflicts with humanity, superintelligence would execute it regardless. Continuing, the likelihoods of AI leading to human extinction exceeds that of climate change, pandemics, asteroid strikes, supervolcanoes, and nuclear war combined. AI may be getting close to human level already, creating a positive feedback loop with no limits. Would be no match for it.
Okay.
All right, move for cost.
Okay, on the death of activism, on activism, so I'm just a little bit confused. Wouldn't don't social media companies or don't like activist programs, don't they also use social media to promote their, like, wouldn't that also be censored under Section 230?
Yeah, that's our argument. Our argument is that right now, activism that happens on these big social media platforms, although like widespread, isn't able to be effective, right? Because anytime, or well, for two reasons. Number one, because anytime that it like gets to the threat of like creating super wide systemic change that threatens like major powers that be, the more powerful like industries that have control over like social media sites, like say the defense industry, right, can quash that from happening. But secondly, that these social media movements, because they spread so quickly, aren't able to be as effective. So our argument is that social media activism that would happen in a world where it's not on social media is, activism in a world where it does not happen on social media is better.
Okay.
All right. So why are dataopolies, even if like they're more likely to be attacked, like wouldn't they be like way less likely to like cause like a major like leak or something? Like aren't major companies way better defending against cyber attacks than like small ones?
No, well, no, not at all. It's because like such a large attack would require like a larger attack than what these companies would prepare for. So imagine this, like they have all of this like national data security, like maybe they have some sort of protection, but because the attack would be so large, because of the possibility that there's such vast information on it, then it would be like larger what they would be anticipating.
Wait, so why isn't like Oracle like been like just like cyber attacked into oblivion? If they have like they hold like CIA servers on their like databases, like stuff like that, right?
What do you mean, like why is one company not like you can't just say like why is one
Wait, if
company
your
not
argument-
cyber attacked before? That's not what the argument
Wait,
is. It's like it's when there's only one like kind of cyber or yeah, when there's only like one big tech company, then it's obviously going to be cyber attacked. Right
Wait,
now,
it's not like there's one big tech company. Your argument is that small like firms are going to become part of larger firms, and this is going to incentivize them to be cyber attacked, right? But I would say that those large companies are probably better defending against cyber attacks, right? I mean, what I'm understanding is that you're saying that like the benefits of like cyber attacking those companies just like outweighs, so that they'll like try really hard. But like, why is it like a company like Oracle that has like all the CIA databases on it get like cyber attacked into oblivion?
because it can be cyber attacked before, but these attacks would be much larger. Like if there's a large variety of them. And anyways, they could like okay, one example, Oracle does not prove anything. There's still thousands of like I guess big tech companies. It would be when Oracle would have a bunch of different subsections, then it would be uniquely vulnerable to attack. So like even if it's like a kind of somewhat medium-sized company right now, like even if it's considered compared to the rest of them, like yes, that company is being cyber attacked more than like smaller companies are. That's what our argument is. But when it's like done on when more companies start becoming attacked, then it gets even worse.
Straight down to case. They're off. Yeah. I won't get to everything, so I'll say out loud, but it's good. And that's good. Mark down again. Yeah. Let me know when y'all got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Y'all good?
Let me pull it up.
Yep. You know, 1 second. Okay, just let me know.
Can I get like a word doc? So it must be- Thanks. Got it.
Everyone's good?
Give me just 1 sec.
Yep.
Looks like I just got to reload.
Yeah.
All right, I got
All
it.
right, cool. Straight down. Start with an overview. Courts are moving away from Section 230 and making companies liable. Policy 24 finds that this month Snap lost its most specific case in which families say their children died after overdosing on fentanyl purchased via Snapchat in October. California court rejected an attempt by Snap, Meta, Google, TikTok to dismiss cases that charge companies with negligence and taking kids to the platforms in a way that causes harm. And after following to get a sex trafficking case dismissed on legal shutdown completely in November, the number of claims against social media companies has spiked recently with 181 being filed from 22 through 23. A, this is the best and most recent piece of evidence on the issue, which is why it's preferred. It's literally from 2 weeks ago. B, there's no reason to vote after the status quo is fixing the issues that they talked about. On genocide proper, first, non-unique, meta is improving itself. The incentive already exists. Crystal 23 finds that Meta has taken steps to address its role in mass atrocities, international condemnation, push Meta to invest in human rights policies, and regularly meets with civil society organizations, just its moderation procedures, improving efforts toward proactive automated hate speech detection. 2, turning repealing causes global crackdown. Hellerstein 21 finds that they set a precedent for countries to introduce new policies that place severe restrictions on digital speech, influence the conversation on tech regulation in Pakistan, where the government has repeatedly tightened control of the internet in recent years. Pakistani authorities use this as justification to outlook on their own policy. This outweighs on scope. This happens everywhere. They give one isolated example of a genocide that's already happened with the U.S. If you affirm that goes globally and you cause more genocide everywhere. 3, no LinkedIn moderating hate speech knows capability just doesn't exist right now. Crystal 23 finds that moderation remains a perfect. Facebook still lacks technical capabilities and has not yet developed automated tools. Facebook also lacks resources. Tech companies recent drilling revenues and mass layoffs. Even if they say that they're going to be able to moderate under an Afro, that doesn't mean that companies are actually going to be capable of doing this. So they're just saying that rhetoric, they're just using rhetoric to say that they're going to solve it. That doesn't mean that in practice it's actually going to work. On activism, first, no link. Online campaigns end much quicker. They don't cause any change. Voucher 19 finds that online movements were not faster than campaigns that forge in-person connections. Civil rights movement took a decade to get to the March on Washington. Time spent forming and deepening social connections, strengthening the movement. By contrast, mass protests such as Occupy Wall Street formed rapidly, but lacking that underlying resilience created over time, lost their potential to affect change. Then turn it. App causes social movements to be ineffective in 2 ways. Firstly, censoring information that begins momentum. Tigner 20 finds that videos of horrific police violence against Black Americans went viral on platforms sparking protests in all 50 states. This would have been actively impeded without Section 230. Without Section 230, George Floyd's final words would have been blocked from social media platforms along with countless accounts of Black people. Secondly, destroying communication by making information disorganized. Granted, 23 finds that platforms must organize content in order to display it in a usable manner. If Section 230 doesn't apply, platforms will be incentivized to present information in a disorganized jumble that lawyers can be certain wouldn't inspire anyone to use. Section 230 has enabled platforms to host speech of activists and organizers. Without it, the internet will be a far less hostile place for collaboration. Prefer this on uniqueness and on the status quo. We're seeing, for example, there has been protests in the status quo that are worth it working. For example, about things about like the Middle East, we've seen anti-Semitic protests, and we have seen that work. For example, the status quo is clearly working. On AI. First, we'll adapt to AI. Zang21 finds that AI is not smart. It comes down to how systems are designed, relies on government, and it can be frustrating to feel they're not measuring up. But there will be a lag in legislative actions with any massive tech. That does not mean that we will never get there. Society itself is adapting. This is not the first time tech breakthroughs become a disruptive force, but it can feel like a crisis. But we have seen many revolutions. This evidence is really good. It says that when you have government regulations, for example, like if you look at our case, the Federal Trade Commission is already increasing regulations for AI. The app is the only way you change that, because if you don't have regulation, because the FTC has to focus on, for example, litigation, they can't actually put resources and money in order to stop AI from developing in the harmful ways they talk about. Right now, we're on the good trajectory. AI hasn't caused any damages. That's because the government has taken a good role, but that only changes under an app role. Second, AI is slow, peaceful, and countermeasures check. Shermer 17 finds that doomsday scenarios involve long if then contingencies. Risk is improbable. Development has been much slower, allowing checks at each stage. Humans would turn computers off. Google developed an off switch, a big red button. Scenarios are predicted on a false analogy between natural and AI. Dystopians project a Parochial psychology. It is equally possible AI will develop with no desire to annihilate. The implication computers want something means it will live with punishments for behaving badly. Given 0% historical success rate of predictions coupled with incrementally development over the decades, we have plenty of time to prevent any conflicts. Two key words. One, if we have plenty of time, that means that the FTC is key to solve it. We just give it the time to do that. But second, it says that you need punishments for their impact of that. So for their impacts not to happen, the only way you get these punishments is from the FTC, which is only under a neck world. Easy neck battle.
Okay. Okay, that was 120. The order is going to be our case, their case.
Her dog.
Yeah, there will be a doc in their case. I'll send it right now.
You said doc just on their case, right?
Yes, sir. So. Is everyone ready?
I didn't get it either.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, no, I just got it.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Everyone's good. First, they read an overview about how the squad is solving. Their evidence just says that companies are being held for negligence, which is a crime that the companies themselves are committing. Section 230 prevents them from being sued for everything that their users do, which is very distinct. Then, on genocide, first they say Meta is investing in HR policies. Number one, they're not working for our uniqueness. And number two, we'd say these policies are inherently reactive. They wait for a genocide to happen and then they try to crack down on it after the fact. Second, they read a global crackdown about India and Pakistan, which does not have an impact. Don't evaluate this turn. And we would say that even if Section 230 is repealed, Pakistan's probably just going to pursue whatever policies it wants to pursue because they have their own domestic incentives. Third, they say that Facebook cannot moderate. That's in the status quo because they have no incentive to invest in the technology that would enable them to moderate because they can't be held liable for what their users do. Without 230, they would have to moderate or they would literally get taken down and no advertisers would go on their site. On activism, first they say that these movements burn out fast, but Who20 finds that this is not true. It analyzes their evidence, finds that these social movements have actually been effective and have not burned out in the past. Then they read a bunch of turns. We would say that our case outweighs it because it turns the uniqueness. White22 finds that right now, the protests are not working on social media, and overall they have essentially failed, which means it's a risk of offensive vote app. All of their arguments are about how censoring on these large sites would make information disorganized, but they've conceded all the warrants for why people moving to smaller platforms is comparatively better than these bigger platforms. For example, they're not controlled by the consolidated individuals like Musk who control, for example, X and who actually shut down dissent. Then on AI, they read a bunch of impact defense. Our evidence is comparatively better. Number one, it's far more recent than their evidence. It's years newer, which means it's able to analyze the most recent trends. Number two, they've conceded the warrant from the evidence that right now AI is nearing human intelligence when it reaches human intelligence because it can iteratively improve itself. It doesn't matter whether we have the potential to stop it in the coming decades because it will become smarter and smarter than us and inhibit all of our ability to actually stop it in the first place. That point is very clean in our case. Let's go to theirs. On dataopolies. First, cybersecurity is the most resilient industry and will weather the trade-off. Murphy 23 finds that economic hardships are unlikely to have an effect on the cybersecurity industry. Cybersecurity is the growing business priority. Increasingly capable automation will only add to the need for security practitioners. Second, the government would subsidize cybersecurity to keep it afloat. Homeland Security 22 finds that Biden has announced $1 billion in funding for a new cybersecurity grant program that will be available to help the country become more resilient to cyber threats. Third, tech companies will strictly follow regulations. Kovacs 22 finds the contractors ensure they would comply with federal requirements or end up paying millions for violations. Fourth, Turnit. Their link is that companies will consolidate, but if they consolidate, they will have more resources to protect their assets and prevent against cyber attack, which means their case actually decreases the risk of a cyber attack when their link triggers. On the cyber impact. First, deterrence solves. Lonergan 22 finds because a state would detect a cyber operation and retaliate, the likelihood of such a threat is low. Indeed, Anderson 14 finds that deterrence works. The threat of retaliation will keep actors in check through mutually assured destruction. Thus, Lindsay 15 concludes that cyber attackers intentionally keep the costs they inflict below the threshold of retaliation and outweighs on probability. Mueller 21 finds that cyber attacks have yet to kill. The U.S. has experienced hundreds of thousands, none have caused violence. Then second, it's functionally impossible to attack nuclear control systems. Lonergan 22 finds that conducting cyber operations against nuclear systems is hard. It requires access. It is unlikely that they would conduct such a cyber operation given the risk of retaliation. Then on C2. First, they have no link. Their first link card, the Theory and Weissman card, concedes our link. The AI development will stop entirely, which takes out their impact because there is no AI to regulate. And their second link card, the Zaworski evidence, doesn't mention Section 230 a single time. Second, algorithmic bias is short-term. Financial incentives to compete solve. Parker 22 finds that suppliers continually work to provide technology that is as effective and possible and accurate as possible across all types of users. A product cannot be competitive if developed using non-diverse data. Third, on the impact, their Thomas evidence is entirely unwarranted for why algorithmic bias itself risks extinction. It says that bias is one problem with algorithms, and then later says that algorithms and AI risk extinction, which means number one, their own evidence concedes that their impact defense on our case is false, so it takes out all the defense on our case. And fourth, their own argument concedes our link that AI development will stop, which would prevent any risk of AI ever causing extinction, and we don't even need the regulation they talk about, which wouldn't work anyway because the FTC is controlled by big companies and always lobby to prevent any real change. Ready for cross?
Yeah. Is it fine if I just stay seated?
Yes, sir. You can have the first question.
Yeah. Will you explain the problem with their Thomas evidence?
Yeah. The Thomas evidence says, actually, I can leave this up. The Thomas evidence says that algorithmic bias is one problem with artificial intelligence.
Okay.
And then it says that artificial intelligence risks extinction through like drones and all these other sorts of things. Our entire, like, number one, this concedes that artificial intelligence and like algorithms cause extinction.
That's just not what the evidence is about.
It is.
No.
Here. I'll read the exact.
Yeah, it says working to eliminate data bias, which has corrupting effect on algorithms and a fat fly in AI opinion. And then it says if we bumble and prepare, it will be the biggest mistake in human history. It would enable brutal dictatorship with unprecedented inequality, suffering, and extinction. It doesn't talk about.
Yeah, no, but it does. The part that you're not reading, but that you read in case, says machines being fed faulty incentives by humans would create a real threat for their competence, which is something independent of bias, right?
But if you keep on reading the same part, it says that it also leads to.
Yeah, wait, no, then it says it emphasizes the importance of preparation in that it's important to eliminate data bias because they're bad for algorithms, but it doesn't say that data bias is what makes algorithms cause extinction.
Keep on reading.
Yeah, it says expect algorithms, and if we bumble unprepared, it will be biggest mistake in human history. Enabled. That never says out that it's the bias that enables global dictatorship. So my question
so you're telling me that it goes from a whole paragraph about bias, and then it just says that we're going to lead to extinction, but that has nothing to do with bias.
Yes, it's
so
listing.
What is he saying?
He's listing the risks of AI. That actually leads to my question for you. Can you explain to me how algorithmic bias is going to, in the words of your evidence, quote, enable brutal global dictatorship with unprecedented inequality?
Sure, you feed faulty information to algorithms, which then.
Why does that cause dictatorship?
What? Yeah, so for your argument, that means that, like, for example, dictators might have more resources with faulty incentives. Like, for example, AI bias can mean that the populations of their country, and they're getting falsehoods from the population of their country and what they want, which then gives like a politician faulty data, which turns into dictatorship.
So your argument is that faulty algorithms will cause politicians to become dictators.
Yeah, that's one of the
things
we talk about. There's also, if you read the entire article that we cite from Thomas 20, it also talks about things like drones, surveillance, and inequality, which can all pretty easily lead to extinction.
I mean, that part isn't read in your case.
I'm just telling you the warn as to how.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Extinction. All right, let's look at data. Actually, no, let's look at your case. On activism, I guess. Why aren't protests working in the status quo? Like, what types of protests aren't working right now?
Our argument is that protests are not working right now because of the nature of big platforms. The warrant that I give in rebuttal,
Protests about what specifically? Because I'd say right now there's like one.
So white evidence lists Black Lives Matter as an example, and the white evidence's argument is essentially that because these big platforms are controlled by powerful individuals, like X is controlled by Elon Musk, and they oppose movements like Black Lives Matter, they actually inhibit that speech.
All right.
You take it, perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just concede that it doesn't that cybersecurity doesn't need something. And in case I was on FTC, they say that our evidence says that AI development is going to be thumbed. Yes, that's our argument, but that also means that litigation goes through the FTC, so even if AI stops existing, there's still a lot of court cases. There's still a lot of court cases related to that the FTC has to deal with. On the first one, they say that like AI development is solved. Yes, that does the FTC still has a chance with court cases. We also talk about over-regulation, which is why the FTC specifically is going to have to do a lot. Then they say that algorithmic bias is short-term. Look at their own they say clearly we don't just do like algorithmic bias and get that static. Isn't just short-term. They just say that like our impact is bad. One comes from an MIT professor in reading second researcher. Second, it's
relatively simple. We're trying to make the card look like three different things, which is really one paragraph that's talking about how algorithmic bias can lead to like extinction. Like there's one of the articles, things like drone surveillance and info is because that's violence. Genocide. Okay, so go for the last response on you. No, go for the opening. That just says the companies are it's also it also talks about how there's been a lot more claims. It's not just about the example was but also at the bottom of the list says how companies are still being a lot more the amount of cases that spiked. Also, it is about the content they're into. Content is about people, for example, selling drugs on their sites, or people doing like sex trafficking, many right on genocide. Go for the response moderators, hate speech, moderating hate speech. They say that this one's been statistically you have to moderate, but there's actually less an incentive in impactful because they don't because in impactful they face litigation for everything on activism. Go for both the terms. They say uniqueness focus on working right now. So they can see, for example, the Middle East looking for focus, which has shaped the way that actions happen between Israel and Palestine. We also don't really respond to the unique one, for example, with the censorship term, about how if you censor, for example, certain content, then the actual goal is a breach. On AI, they just say their evidence is more recent and that AI is near being intelligent. Take FTC as key for regulations.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I've got.
There's no DR case.
Really?
Yeah.
Next, from existential drone surveillance and inequality caused by algorithmic bias. Currently, the FTC is taking over the private sector and specifically regulating AI discrimination. The problem is that repealing Section 230 causes companies to be paranoid of liability and causes an overregulation of AI that sets the US back 30 years. This increase in paranoia leads to lawsuits which fall under the hands of the FTC. Because AI regulations are vague and non-compliant, the FTC has to spend key resources handling lawsuits. Because the FTC is the single most entity governing AI discrimination, without them, AI bias goes rogue, creating dictatorship, inequality, and destroying all concepts of surveillance. Okay, now move on to some of their actually just on the first contention, we'll concede that they're like not the impact beyond deterrence. That means that there's no risk of an impact regardless, and it cancels other offense. But on front lines, first, the FTC has a job to do AI to do the AI development. So even if they say that it's decreasing right now, the FTC still has a job done. This card is talking about how it gave the FTC the jurisdiction to like over the area of regulating AI. And second, we also think that overregulation is still bad. They do not respond to the actual warrant of the card. Second, they say that algorithm bias is short term, but it's not short term. It literally their entire AI scenario is predicated off it not being short term, which means that it's like they have to choose one. It can't be both ways. But and third, they say that Thomas is unwarranted. That's not true. It talks about how there is still a risk of AI being like uniquely bad. And second, it also comes from an MIT professor. It's not unwarranted, and it specifically talks about it specifically talks about AI discrimination, and then goes into extinction. They have not said that there's a gap in between the two. There's not a gap. Just read the article itself. Now moving on to genocide. Now moving on to their place on genocide. On the overview, they mishandle it. All they say that it is just negligence. But even if it might be about negligence, it's still about the liability of cases. And these cases have spiked because of the actual content and the fact that they're being sued. And because these cases are down, like even if negligence is a warrant for that, because they're down, it brings uniqueness, which should matter anyways. And on meta improving itself, they just say they try to respond afterward. They just say that they try to respond afterward, but that's not true. Meta has like regulations against them. They're not gonna want to respond afterward if they have regulations in place that are able to solve before it. That does not make any sense. And on the third about moderating hate speech, it fails. They say that Facebook can't have liability for what it uses, but there's less incentive in an after because they, if anything, they would still face more liability for the actions and have to protect against it. On activism, on our no link, they just say that social movements are burnt out, but we list examples specifically about the quicker Wall Street and also the Middle East, which proves that, we also list examples in the Middle East, how they've been becoming rampant. They also say, they make an argument of how small businesses would continue shut down, but that's not true. On AI, well, first of all, the FTC, they have not answered the cross application before because the FTC is the one regulating it. So if there's burnout and no trade-off, then they're not able to regulate it, which means it's tested.
How much is it? 140. Okay. Starting now. Yes. We have 3 seconds left.
Okay, it'll be weighing our case seconds.
What should I fill the wing?
Our case is good. All right. We're going for RC3 about AI. 2 concessions effectively end the round. First, they conceded the Barton evidence that we are near a human level AI intelligence, and that would create a positive feedback loop with no limits. That would create extinction as soon as it finds a goal that conflicts with humanity. That means that it's try or die for the AF, and any risk of offense on our argument about AI wins us the round. But second, they have conceded that generative AI is protected because it is trained on user, or 230 protected because it's trained on user or published data. And that Weissman finds that this repeal would halt innovation because the threat of litigation from potentially illegal creations prevents the ability for it to be publicly trained, stopping development. This short circuits their case because if AI development would stop entirely, then there's no risk of AI causing extinction. And then our case is just completely conceded. So at that point, you can, like, that pretty much ends the round, there. But
for instance, both cases,
yeah, but then on their argument about AI, 2 responses that are essentially conceded also function as terminal defense. First, fully conceded is the last response. The FTC is heavily influenced by lobbyists, which are mostly major tech companies that want AI development to continue. So that number 1, this means that they have no solvency because the FTC won't thoroughly regulate AI enough. And second, that it's comparatively better to have a world where no AI development happens at all. Secondly, is the analysis that Michael makes on the Thomas evidence, which is that the Thomas evidence never actually says that the reason that AI is going to cause extinction is because of algorithm bias, which means that even in a world where algorithm bias is gone, AI still has a risk of causing extinction, which means that in a world where Section 230 causes the FTC to not regulate or to regulate algorithm bias, there is no solvency for the extinction that AI would cause. And that means that the only risk of solvency for the impact that both teams are going for is the AF, because they've conceded that voting AF and through Section 230 liability that would litigate these companies developing like AI technology out of existence because of the threat of potentially illegal creations that they would create is the only way to fully stop like AI. Is there anything else you want to cover?
I don't think so. I would just say that the overview, like we have the same length, the overview obviously doesn't apply. their Weissman.
Yeah, we have the we on like the top level stuff, we have the same link, pretty much. So like that doesn't apply. At the end of the day, like they've conceded, we're the app and they've conceded our uniqueness that AI is on track to cause extinction right now. So like, and they've conceded that affirming would destroy AI, which is also their impact. So it's just like really clean for us.
Ready for cross. You can have the first question.
Why doesn't the overview matter?
The overview doesn't matter because our links are the same. Your Weissman evidence says that affirming would stop the digital.
The overview just means that the status quo is good, right? Because if AI companies are already being held liable through, for example, court systems, that means that your impacts are already being solved for in the status quo.
The problem is that our links are the same. You've read and we have conceded explicitly the link in your case from the Weissman evidence that says it would stop the next digital revolution and stop AI from being developed, which means like if you're going to read a response that contradicts your own argument, I guess you can do that.
I mean, if we win our overview, that basically just means that because your only response to that's about response to both our links. If it takes both our links off and we win the overview, that just means that the status quo is good.
No, the overview is not offense. There's no reason.
Right, but
there's no reason why the world would get worse.
Sure, it's not offense, but it can take out all the offense in the round insofar as you just said it can take out both our links, which means that if anything, the judge just votes for a good status quo.
Or the judge can vote for not reading contradictory defense on your own case and then trying to go for it in the back half. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about AI.
Sure.
So if you've conceded that the FTC is controlled by lobbyists and that they thus like will not be effective at regulating AI because they're essentially like controlled by big tech's pockets, don't you have no offense?
No. It's working right now. They're the ones that do it the most, and that's why, for example, AI hasn't gone out of hand with this. There's a huge.
Wait, your evidence does not say that the FTC is working.
Right
It says that they're in charge of regulating.
Right, and there's literally nothing bad happening with AI right now.
Yeah, that's because it hasn't been developed. That's why your evidence says
I
it
mean,
can
our
stop
case would
the-
probably disagree with that.
It said
but-
your evidence has said that it can stop the next digital revolution. Obviously, that our argument is that that's happening now per the most recent evidence, which is on our impact that you've conceded. Okay. You can have a question.
Let's see. Okay, oh yeah, wait, on the lobbyist stuff, if the FTC is the only like group that's governing the, that's kind of like governing control of AI right now, even if it's controlled by lobbyists, should we still try and prevent them from being overstretched because that's what makes them not capable of solving anything? So even if it's controlled by lobbyists, if they're the only group that's capable of solving, how is that? Like,
It's not, because the comparative is that our link, which is actually like the link evidence that you have in your case, says that when you affirm, it increases massively litigation for AI development, which per the words of your evidence would stop the digital revolution of AI. Stopping AI in its tracks is much better than trying to regulate it, per the warrants for why the FTC is controlled by.
And also it's also about solvency, right? Because if both of our impacts are like extinction for AI, and then the FTC at its best can't solve, then it doesn't really matter if there's like no FTC or like a little bit of FTC.
Right. It'll be overview and then just like the whole AI debate.
Sounds good.
Extend the overview. We give you two reasons why it's the most important. First, it's the most recent piece of evidence in the round. The second is that it proves that the status quo is good. If the status quo is good, you're voting neg in this round. The reason why the status quo is good is because companies like AI companies, Snapchat, social media companies are already being held liable for bad things on their platform. Their entire link is that AI companies aren't going to be held liable under Section 230, and that's good because AI is bad. However, it isn't contradictory whatsoever. We're just saying that their entire link is happening in the status quo. If AI companies are already being held liable, that means that they're not actually protected under Section 230, which means that that also functions as terminal defense on their entire AI contention, because if they're not being held, if they are being held liable in the status quo, even though Section 230 exists, that means that their impacts are going to happen on any world. They just say that it's the same link, so it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't. It's definitely not contradictory. If AI companies are being held liable and are currently facing lawsuits in the status quo, that means that their impact are going to happen on any world. At that point, let's go to the entire AI debate. It's pretty simple. Let's go to FTC first. Our argument is that right now FTC is focusing on algorithmic bias, but repeal decimates AI and innovation and overregulation. That's really important because the FTC is the biggest person that actually takes account for the AI over algorithmic bias and stops it from leading to extinction. They just say, first they say that, I guess, AI development is going to stop entirely, which means that there's going to be no AI to actually lead to extinction. No, that's not what our evidence says. Our evidence says that there's going to be over-regulation. It doesn't matter if you have no AI whatsoever. The over-regulation still means that the FTC has to take resources away for example, lawsuits and things like that, which means that even if there's no AI, there's still a lot of litigation that happens behind the scenes, which stops key resources. And if the FTC doesn't have these key resources, they can't stop AI from actually over-regulating and using algorithmic bias to lead to extinction. They say our autonomous evidence doesn't say that's going to lead to extinction. Yes, it does. It says that things like drones, surveillance, and all these things, if you look into the actual article itself, or even if you read the part before it talks about dictatorship, they don't actually contest what the evidence says. It just says that it doesn't say it, but it does. Read it yourselves. Then they say that the FTC is influenced by lobbyists. No, they're not. They're literally doing it in the status quo. It has nothing to do with lobbyists. They've already done it in the past, and they're succeeding in the status quo. It's pretty easy for the next.
Okay. You have 3 seconds. I'm tired. I'm going to extend it. Right. The order is going to be their overview, our case weighing. Actually, it's going to be weighing their overview, our case. Sorry, complicated order. Everyone good?
Is it, it's same weighing from summary, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
This round has been over since summary. They dropped the try or die weighing that per the Barden evidence, we are near human AI level intelligence and that it would create a positive feedback loop with no limits, which would cause extinction as soon as it finds a goal that conflicts with humanity, which means our argument is literally try or die, trillions of people. And if we have even a tiny, tiny risk of our argument, we win the round. At that point, let's go to the overview. Ilan tries to throw up a Hail Mary because this round is over. There are 3 reasons you should not evaluate their overview. Number 1, it is contradictory with their case. We have the exact same link. Their evidence says that AI would be stopped in its tracks, and so does our evidence when you affirm, which means I'll explicitly concede what Ilan was extending in his final focus about their argument that AI would be stopped per their Weissman evidence, and that contradicts with their case. Second, they've conceded the front line that negligence is a crime independent of the users of these companies. But when you repeal Section 230, these companies are liable for everything their users do, whereas the cases they're talking about right now are only about what the platforms themselves are liable, not for what their users have done. At that point, we're definitely beating the overview at least somewhat, which means if we win our argument, we win the round. So you can extend it. Generative AI is protected by 230 because it is trained on user-published data. Weissman finds that a repeal would halt innovation because the threat of litigation from potentially illegal creations prevents the ability for it to be publicly trained, stopping development. They can see the Barton evidence that we are near human AI level intelligence, that it would create a positive feedback loop with no limits, which would create extinction as soon as it finds a goal that conflicts with humanity. Our argument entirely takes out their case. They've conceded that by stopping AI in its tracks, which is what their case evidence says would happen post 230, that means there is absolutely no risk of AI causing extinction at all. This is especially true in the context of their Thomas evidence, which says there is some algorithmic bias in AI, and then later says that AI will cause extinction. It doesn't matter if the FTC is okay at regulating, because we are winning our link that when you get rid of Section 230, it means that AI will not be developed at all, which means we don't even need regulation, and we can stop AI in the first place, and per the most recent best evidence, stop a runaway AI that would become smarter than humans, cause extinction. We have at least a 10% chance of our argument, probably 100, and they have no offense. It's game over for the app. Good round.
I'm not allowed to disclose, right?
No.
Have a great day, y'all.
Thank you for doing this.